Hello and welcome to another episode of Software Should Be Free with your hosts Tim Abel and David Sheardown. And joining us today is our guest Duncan Brown. So you might know me from previous episodes. I'm a software developer in Reading, UK, looking to do more entrepreneurial things to help people out. David, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm David Sheardown. I'm, I suppose, a software integrator or a systems integrator, if you want to call it that, and based out near Bath. And that's me.
Cool. And Duncan?
My name is Duncan Brown. I'm a freelance software developer, and I'm based in London.
Excellent. Right. So the couple of reasons that I've got Duncan on the call is, one, some lovely enthusiasm about the podcast, which I just love. And the other is on the last show, which Duncan very kindly listened to. So we have at least one listener. Hooray! Hello, Duncan. Listener number one. I was talking about the outsourcing thing that I did as an attempt to grow my entrepreneurial skills. And yeah, you had some questions, which hopefully you can remember because it was a little while ago. And I said I wasn't going to answer any until we were recording. So do you want to dive in and see where we get to?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed hearing about your outsourcing kind of adventure with this guy who you hired to convert.
A lady, I should say.
No, it was a lady. Sorry,
yeah.
Sorry.
That's right.
The person you hired,
yes,
who was able to convert your old blog post into the new blog post format, and
indeed,
and this was a successful kind of exercise for you. But the thing that I really wanted to know about during that episode was, how did you find this person? How did you know that they were for the job?
That was super easy. I went on Upwork, which I keep hearing about this thing. I think they renamed Upwork not that long ago, which is a site for freelance people around the world. And it's a two-sided marketplace. So I created a hiring account and wrote up a little jobs description. So tried to make it sort of self-filtering a little bit. So I wrote some slightly scary technical things in there, but not too scary. Like, I'm going to want pull requests on GitHub, but you don't have to know that in advance. I can help with that. And a little description of like making it quite clear, like I've got this thing link, and I could obviously, because it's all public, I could link to it all. I might be able to share the description later. But anyway, basically, it's going to be a really rote task. I've got all these blog entries. I found this converting website. I want you to copy each one, paste it into the converting website, and that'll take the HTML, turn it into Markdown, go back on GitHub's website, paste it in to the page, and then you can just generate a pull request with a few button clicks on there. One pull request per page. And I was like, how much is this worth as a thing? So given it's that you can get really cheap international labor on this thing, I was like, well, let's not go too cheap. Let's see if $50 is something that will attract me someone who's going to be capable as a fixed price. And yeah, this person came back to me. They already had a GitHub account, so they'd probably done something previously. Yeah. And yeah, they just cranked through it, and all around a great success. I ended up with 100 and something pull requests on my blog, which I am still working through in terms of like just double checking that they still look right, doing a bit of tidying up.
There are a lot of things about that which are really cool. I mean, you've got a kind of built-in sort of supervision process in the shape of pull requests. You can see them coming in, and you can evaluate them. And it sounds like the Upwork does a lot of the kind of filtering for you. Did you have to interview more than one person, or did you even interview the person who you got? Did you just kind of
no, so you put out a proposal. You say, I'd like this done for this price, and people can then submit that they want to do it, and they can put a little bit about them and why they would be suitable. I think I only had the one person come back, and that was fine because they were fine. It's just text-based. And then once there's a little to and fro dance you do of like, you send them a, like, yes, I'd like to accept. And then they send another, like, yes, I accept your accept of the thing, which is okay, fine. I'm sure they got their reasons. And then you get a chat, and you can ramp up the to and fro all within the platform.
And do you see yourself using this person again? Do you think this is
yeah. Like one of the things that's sort of come out of this as a learning is I've basically given myself an enormous job, because now I have 130 pull requests to merge and tidy up. So maybe the next thing would be to be like, okay, maybe I should outsource a slightly bigger piece of the work for like, and a bit more like free reign. Like, okay, here's $150 or whatever, and I'd like all of these blog posts to be properly formatted.
Yeah.
Like, fix up the code and what have you. But that would obviously require more skills. They'd have to actually know a bit of Markdown. And this person might be capable of that. I don't know. Good feedback each way. Sorry, Duncan, go on.
Sorry, it feels like it would be really nice to be able to focus on outcomes, but the nature of getting basically a total stranger to do the work is that one's inclined to kind of specify it quite closely to avoid the danger that they'll just kind of completely go off on a
yeah, and that's something I wanted to do with this first attempt, is like really maximize my chances of success on it. Like make it a really kind of hard to get wrong, like a really black and white, this is either done or it's not kind of process. And then maybe once someone's done that, I've now got a bit of faith with this person that I could give them something a little bit less well defined. They offer fixed price or hourly rate, and that person advertised an hourly rate, which I think was like $10 an hour. So just looking at that, if it took them 4 hours, then they're doing slightly better than their hourly rate.
Yeah,
which is cool. Yeah.
I wish I could outsource things. I've got a vague idea that things could be better.
Yeah.
But I don't really. As soon as I start thinking about the amount of context I would have to transfer to that person, I can get a bit back to.
Yeah, well, I've learned an interesting framework around it recently. I've been listening to all these entrepreneur people talking about, I got a virtual assistant and it changed my life and all this sort of stuff. You can sort of see how, you're doing this stuff that's almost menial, but maybe I could outsource it, maybe I couldn't, I don't know. And this is probably why I've sort of stumped up. One of the things I realized is it's like there's boundaries on all sides. So it doesn't make sense to outsource everything in your life if you're on a low wage and have no prospect of increasing it. So one of the boundaries is the cash flow available. So what that kind of implies is when you have a little bit of money, then you might take that and reinvest it into outsourcing. But that then has to lead to something. So the next piece of the puzzle is from Rob Moore's book called Money. And one of the things he said is know your hourly rate. So what do you currently earn for your time? And then it's very simple. You ruthlessly try and do more things that are above that and less things that are below that.
Yes.
So that's without the context of limits on not going bust. But I think you put those two together and you got a framework. So like, all right, it's a bit difficult with client work because they're kind of paying you to show up. But that aside, if you've got the opportunity to, for example, outsource cleaning the house, like that's a well understood rate. You can get somebody to do that for £10 to £15 an hour, around where I live anyway. So if I can free up a bit of time and then like just make it simple, like, let's say I become a freelancer on Upwork and I can earn £30 an hour for being a programmer on Upwork, because it's a very competitive market, then it makes sense for me, instead of spending 3 hours cleaning my house, to spend 3 hours on Upwork, and then I get to pay the cleaner and keep half the money.
Yeah.
And then there's some other stuff that I've listened to about, like, sort of good and bad ways of outsourcing. So arguably what I just did is not a fantastic way of outsourcing, apart from being a learning experience, in that it's kind of generated more work. So what I've heard is it might take you a few attempts to find the right person where you can give them like outcome-based things where you don't have to handhold. But when you nail both the person and getting that approach right, so it really does free up your time, then it opens up the Rob Moore thing of like, you can just crank up. I think as a contractor, I don't know about you two, but I'm a little bit stuck because I already have kind of maxed out my hourly rate on that. And by outsourcing stuff doesn't help me increase that. If I can get more into product work or entrepreneurial things or side projects, then it becomes much more, okay, I can spend time on the side project, or I can spend time on, this or the other that may or may not be related. So yeah, that's where my thinking is at the moment. You got any more questions on the thing? Does it?
Well, one kind of like slightly like more kind of general question is if you, I feel like the dream, like as a contractor as well, I would love to be able to have, two of myself. I'd like to be able to say I will work both these jobs. But I can't do that because I'm only one person. But if there were someone who I trusted that they would do a good job in sort of in my name, as it were, I'd be thrilled to have that capability of kind of doubling the capacity. And I feel like the road of outsourcing that we've talked about is sort of the same road in a way of like, it's all about developing trust with the person whom you feel happy to delegate things, first small things, then bigger things. I'm just, this is not really a question, it's more of a statement, but I think I'm kind of interested in how you get to that kind of working relationship from sort of zero, from kind of like, especially as a contractor where you're effectively a company of one, to becoming a company of two, or a company of three. It's
yeah, I mean, that's kind of the consultancy model, isn't it? Where you start off doing the work and then you add more, I kind of think of that as like growing a sales operation in a way, in that kind of the key thing in scaling a software consultancy is the sales pipeline. If you can get that running, then you can bring more people in to fulfill it. For me, my sales pipeline is largely recruiters, the occasional direct. They're generally not looking for me to, like, they're hiring me or they're looking to, pad out their team. They're not looking, I think if I'd have to sell in a different way if I was trying to sell in that way. Yeah, it's an interesting subject. Right. So I think we should move on to our probably burning question from anyone listening is, we'd love to hear a bit more about you, Duncan, and your background. And if you can keep your volume levels up, that would be awesome.
Sure.
In the process.
Should I give you? I'll give you the very short version, and then if you want a slightly longer version, then
yeah, go for it.
I'll try to be very, very brief. So I taught myself programming 10 years ago on an unrelated job. I went into sort of publishing tech. I worked for a couple of startups. I started a startup which didn't work, but it was fun.
Are you allowed to say what?
Yeah, it was called OnePass, and the idea was that we would take small amounts of money from people who wanted to read individual pieces of long-form journalism online. So let's say you went to the New Yorker, instead of paying £50 for an annual subscription, you'd pay 50p to read just that one article.
Ah.
This was going to be incredibly useful. But funnily enough, users really liked it. It was great for them. But our publishers said, if I can charge them £50 and never have to really do any more work to serve them, why should I go to all the effort to charge them 50p when I don't want to split my market, right? So charge them twice, like, so we had a hard time selling that to publishers, and then I sort of bumped around. I went to work for a government consultancy for a bit, and then I went freelance and have been doing startup things, and now back in the public sector.
Back with Department for Education.
Yeah.
Yes, our budding DFE digital, which is awesome to see blooming at this department. It really seems to be. I was a bit wondering whether the project I was on was a flash in the pan, and then it would just revert to normal. Tissue rejection from the host. But no, it seems to be taking hold. So this is great, and there's lots of people like you and I and an ever increasing team trying to really make a difference and like care about the users and put technology last in a way and put the users first.
I feel like this kind of the ghost of, or I should say the spirit of kind of user-centered design and agile delivery kind of passes through government departments. Like sometimes it goes to Modge, or sometimes it like maybe it'll go to the Home Office kind of one day. Like kind of it just kind of drifts from place to place, and we're fortunate to be in a place where it is right now. So, lucky.
Yeah, we've got some great people leading it, so it's really good. And where would you like to get to, or are you trying to get to next? Have you got like a burning ambition up your sleeve?
I'm kind of curious. I'm sort of two. So I want to become more technical and less technical, I think. I want to do more. I want to do bigger technical problems. I want to sort of use different languages, and I want to tackle bigger, more complicated systems. But at the same time, in my current role, I'm getting to do a bit of the kind of, a bit more team running, documentation writing stuff. It goes more towards the kind of architect TDD stuff. So I'm kind of seeing how those things balance out in the next couple of years.
Cool. Well, that's excellent. Well, hopefully we can get you back again as well, because it really livens things up, like having actual questions. So I'm really happy you could make it.
Right. Yes.
So thank you very much, Duncan. So David, do you want to? You've been a busy Lizzie, as they say in the crowd.
Well,
very
slightly different. Sorry, really loud. It's my operatic voice. I think that's what it is, isn't it? Okay, so I'll try to keep the voice down a little bit. But yes, rather busy. Not quite in the same vein as you guys, really. Although, in a way, what you touched on. About like, having a sales pipeline, and that's the sort of stuff that you'd like to. Well, funny enough, that my role from, lots of integration, as you know, Tim, but for Duncan and anybody else, but it's a lot of systems integration. But my role sort of changed literally over the last couple of weeks. So it's been quite a weird transition, and it's really doing, I suppose, quite a lot more of pre-sales, funny enough, which is an interesting area because you're still, one foot in the technical, and I think that's what Duncan just touched on there, is sort of want to be less technical but more technical, and it's a funny thing because with this you're coming across lots of different technologies, not necessarily lots of different languages, although that comes into it as well. But yeah, so it's actually been quite an eye-opener already in a short space of time, just what really does go on with some fairly sizable, I can't really say names, but some quite large, sizable companies. But the feeling that you do get, or I get anyway, out of it is what you said. It's a different target, obviously, in Department of Education, etc. But it is still the feeling I've been getting is, how you can really help people, because again, there's a lot of money gets spent on this type of stuff, as it does with your stuff as well, and just to really, hopefully anyway, cut through a lot of the technical jargon to find out what is it really that the people want, and that's the great thing. It's either educating through a bit of training, some workshops, or purely sort of explaining how some of this integration that I work with actually works and why it can actually save them a heck of a lot of time. So, yeah, so it's been an interesting...
Do you want to just fill us in a little bit on what your role was and what it's becoming? Just...
Well, yeah, it was obviously... there was a hand in some development, but a lot of it was to do with systems integration. So everything from ERP systems to e-commerce systems to warehouse management systems. I mean, quite mundane things that when you think about them, but when you dig deep, like anything, there's many complexities there and many types of systems that you have to get your head across. So it was, so the previous stuff was really that. And it was great. It was a great challenge, things like that. But I think, it's just different things for different times of life and all the rest of it. So what I'm doing now is less of the core nuts and bolts per se, although I still get my hand in there, of course. But really now, like I say, it's really further upstream, I suppose, before the people have actually, or the companies have actually signed on the dotted line. This is
right. So pre-sales support kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a bit of a wide subject, but the pre-sales support is probably good, a good moniker for that actually.
Yeah, cool. And how's it going so far? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, busy. Yeah. Like I say, it's a different angle, but you do see probably sooner than when you're actually getting involved in these integration projects. You do see what companies, and some of them, like I say, quite large companies, how it's quite weird in this day and age. You sort of think they should have it all figured out with all the software that's available, all the cloud type of stuff that's available, but they're still struggling on fundamentals. So it's a different angle, and going and actually explaining how it can be made so much more simpler, and well, as part of that as well, more robust and everything else. It's actually quite good. Yeah, so I'm actually really enjoying this side of it for sure.
Excellent. I look forward to hearing more about that. So have you, because we've talked about before, like spotting opportunities for like entrepreneurial things within what you're doing, because you've got quite good access to like some really actually serious expensive problems. So have you started to spot things that you're like, oh, if only we could build a thing or sell a thing?
Yeah, well, interesting. It doesn't seem to be, the things that have cropped up for me are I suppose extensions on what the tools that I use already do, but there are some interesting, I suppose, one of the things is where you've got multiple channels of integration. It still seems to be that there's a thing for that and a thing for that and a thing for that, and it seems to be this consolidation of that that never seems to be a solution around that. Now, that's it's a big thing to chew. It really is. It's not an easy thing, but it's where people are trying to, even though they've got maybe automated integrations with 10 things, they still have there's a level of manual intervention management of those things, whereas it just seems like if that was consolidated, I don't know, is there something that we could actually, from a management perspective, to view that, all those integrations? Because even though they're all running, there's not really a single viewpoint. And I'm talking things like, a simple example is things like, price, inventory, sort of product information updates and things like that. All of that, when you really get to it, if you've got multiple channels, there's a lot that can go wrong there that can affect your warehouse to say, the reality is we haven't got 200 of those because we've got a stalled integration and things like that. So there's things like that that are being cropping up, to be honest, which, again, from the top level seem quite mundane, but yeah.
That's really interesting, because I've heard a couple of stories in the past where somebody's been in a business like the one, not specific like the one you're in, but an employee with somewhat entrepreneurial ambitions, and they've spotted a thing. It's like, well, if this is a significant problem that I think people would pay to fix, and I've heard people, they take it to their boss, and like, here, we could build this as part of our company, and the company doesn't have the interest or capacity to do so, and then people will go and spin out like maybe a side project as a start, and then it starts to get traction because they've actually in the middle of expensive problems, and then they end up almost accidentally spinning up a whole other company, and occasionally these get bigger than the parent company.
As I think I might have touched it in the very first episode, actually, was a couple of guys actually, but one guy specifically that did exactly that. It was, I think we touched on it. It was where it was, managing like a central viewpoint of your infrastructure landscape, basically. And I think I was specifically talking about like Microsoft System Center Operation Service or something, or whatever it used to be called. And this one guy essentially did exactly that. There was no way of getting a single viewpoint of all of that across all these branches, larger companies where they've got lots of sort of assets around and all the rest of it. And he just essentially built what would be, I suppose, a web app that just used the API of System Center Operations Studio or System Server, and essentially built a really nice, I suppose, an enhanced dashboard, if you want to call it that. But that was, from, as I understand at the time, just a one-off. But it just ended up driving and driving and driving and building and building. And within a year, I think it was, he ended up spinning that out as a separate company. And it's now, employs, 60 people or something. They've got clients all over the world doing that. So they're still on the go. I checked them out. So it's that type of stuff, as you absolutely said.
Yeah. Well, we better keep on building, testing, and shipping, I think. I better
I think that is
it. if nothing else, I've got to wrap this up because our Zoom call's going to run out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Free technology. So thanks very much both for joining me on this, and I'll get this published. And I'll just say to anyone listening, please do drop us a note on Twitter, Tim_Abel, email us, and just make sure you get in touch and let us know that you're listening, what you thought of it, any feedback, particularly questions, because I wanted to get more into questions that come out. And I think next time we'll probably have a bit more of a think about serving people and audience. So let's all say goodbye together, and people can enjoy their next podcast that they've got lined up. So, bye everyone.
Great stuff. Bye.
Thanks very much.